Welcome to Authors Revealed. I'm Becky Anderson. We are so thrilled we have one of our own, a Chicago author. This is his debut. It's Chad Sells. It's a graphic novel for kids. It's called The Cardboard Kingdom. Great summer read for those 9 to 12-year-olds. Well, Chad, it's so great to have you here. I can't tell you. This is the book. This is the book for summer reading. For that.
Thank you.
Hey, that's all we need to say. Kids really are enjoying this, and we're so happy that you're here. And considering that you're one of our own Illinois authors, so it's fantastic to have her, and illustrators, or I should say, and this is what I always ask when someone's an illustrator or a comic artist. What is the term you like to call yourself when you're thinking about that?
Cartoonist is
Cartoonist?
fine. You know, graphic novelist. I'm not precious about it, you know. I think people like me are in kind of a funny position because what we do spans the range from daily newspaper comic strips to 500-page literary graphic novels, anything you can imagine, from goofy slapstick punchline to mega serious literary genius, you know. So cartoonist is perfectly fine.
Because it's so interesting. Some people are very particular about if they do comics. Sometimes want to be a comic artist. They want to be called, or So, but I think the book is absolutely incredible, and we'll talk about the collaboration you did, which I think is absolutely so cool about this book. But I just want to tell you congratulations. The book's been out almost 3 weeks now, and so it's on bookshelves everywhere. So how does that feel to have your debut book out there?
It feels so wonderful. I just turned 35 in May, and I've been working to be a published graphic novelist for so long. And it means so much to have it out through a mainstream publisher, you know, Penguin Random House, to be on bookshelves everywhere, like you said, to be accessible, you know, to be written up in the New York Times and all these different review outlets. It's really gratifying. And like you said, this was a really unique collaboration, so I've gone through the whole experience, you know, the 3-year publishing process with my group of collaborators, and it's gotten us through the highs and the lows. Well, I think it's especially noteworthy that it's a Knopf book. So Alfred Knopf is over 100 years old now, which is one of the grandest imprints at Random House, and it's so great that you're, you know, of the children's books that Knopf does. This is great that you're part of that. Oh, I agree. I've learned more and more about what they do, you know, ever since I've been working with them, and they seem very invested in emotional, meaningful, powerful, socially conscious books, and
that totally is right.
Honored to be considered among them.
Well, you know, you talk about the review attention. You've gotten tons of review attention, and I think 4-star reviews, which is
5-star reviews.
5? Oh, 5. Oh, I missed one.
Don't ask me to list them all.
That's okay. Well, I can list most of them, but the big one, the mother lode of all reviews, is that Kirkus star.
Oh, thanks.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that one is fantastic. But I think you got a school library journey, a book list, a PW, and now I'm missing one. Then
Center for Children's Books.
Center for Children's Books. The Bulletin for Son. Right.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. 5 stars.
Well, it's, you know, I came to this from the comics world, and we don't really have starred reviews in the comics world. And so this has all been a new learning experience, and some of my collaborators have more experience in publishing, so they're like, oh, that's a big deal. And I'm like, oh, thanks for telling me, you know. And then everyone would be looking up the Wikipedia entry for the history of Kirkus star reviews to see, oh, wow, they only give it to 10% of the reviews, you know.
They're very picky.
But, you know, it more than stars and more than accolades, it's just hearing the emotional responses, whether from adult readers or from kids, which is so cool. You know, because we all worked on this for 3 years and fell in love with the characters and fell in love with the stories, but we just had no idea if anyone else would care. So.
Well, a lot of people do, and it's really struck a tone that they want more. So that will be one of my questions, because we expect to see more. But you know, it's that perfect read for the summer, for that, you know, that sweet spot, which I think is the sweet spot in children's literature right now, that 9 to 12-year-old. There's just some incredible things being produced for that reader, graphic novel-wise, or even just great novels for that 9 to 12-year-old. So when you started this book? Where were the seeds that started, and where did the idea to do this book come from?
I would guess that if you talk to a lot of creators, especially who are a little bit farther along in their life, like, I think that you would find that certain projects sort of emerge throughout different eras of their life, and it takes a while to finally understand, like, when it's ready to put out in the world. And so this is one of those projects for me.
Right.
Years ago, I had been working on a book called The Cardboard Kingdom. Okay. There's just something there's something so magical about cardboard. There's something so boundless and full of possibility about kids' imagination. And, there's nothing better than seeing kids' drawings on the sidewalk, in chalk, or their cute drawings in the window or on the fridge. And this book is just all about celebrating that, but also exploring what kids are doing when they're expressing themselves and experimenting with what they create and how that affects who they make believe as.
Right. So when you think about the Cardboard Kingdom, how much of your childhood is a part of this? Because to me, this book is that perfect book of kids of all different backgrounds. Their situations are all different, but yet they get together in the summertime and they create something. Yeah. And so what was your childhood like? Because this is taking place in, like, suburbia, right? Yeah. So what was your childhood like in Wisconsin growing up?
So I grew up in Marshfield, Wisconsin. Okay. It's a city of about 20,000. And, I think as I grew older, I came to kind of resent that it's kind of quiet and kind of far from a lot of the big cities. But as a kid, it just felt safe and open, and we could just wander, and my neighborhood friends and I would just go from backyard to backyard and see what's up and explore and play whatever games we wanted. And there was something magical about being a kid, and sort of how your map and your territory is bounded by backyards and fences and, like, that weird field that is behind that house, and you don't go past this road. You just sort of really map out a whole kingdom in just a few blocks. And I just loved that. So, one of my few concerns about the book was that I don't know that kids these days necessarily have as much autonomy and the ability to explore on their own. But in this book, it's, we try to make it a somewhat idyllic suburban existence.
But I think so many kids need this kind of experience.
And I hope that
I hope it does encourage that more creative play and getting together with friends, and it doesn't matter who in your neighborhood, but you're going to get together and no one is excluded. And which I think is so great.
And some kids do struggle to socialize, or maybe not everyone understands what their costume is supposed to be. But you can work through those. And I just thought that just the characters, everything about the book was just a bunch of kids trying to figure out who they are, but being accepted, and using these characters to sort of bring out who they are. Absolutely.
Which was so great. So, team of 11 people.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do you do that? And I kept thinking of you, and I'm looking through the book, and I'm thinking, it's sort of like a conductor, and you're conducting, but you're conducting while the piece is being composed at the same time.
That's a really beautiful way to put it.
I'm just thinking of an orchestra, but they don't know exactly what they're going to play yet until you, because you're the one with the artist, the visuals that are putting this together. So how did you do this? And I know there's different short stories throughout the book with the different characters, but at the end it all comes together. So how did you do this with 10 other people?
So it's my relationship with each of those 10 folks is different and a unique snowflake. But I found them all by sort of laying out my vision for the book on my website. And I made a little Google form where you could send in your idea for your character and what their story would entail. And I made it clear that the whole book would be full of overlapping stories, that the kids would show up in each other's chapters. And we did that in early 2015, the whole application process for about 2 months. And I would have follow-up calls and see, what about this? And what if we had this character and this character interact? Or what if, blah, blah, blah. And we all decided to work together. And we've had sort of a private Facebook group where we can all interact, share the latest drafts of scripts or the stories. And every author got to know each other's characters. And so if they showed up in the other story, they would have some idea of how to write them.
Right.
And then we would run it by the other creator to make sure, like, does this seem kosher for what we're having her do?
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't know if we lucked out or if it was just the kind of person who would want to write these stories.
Sure.
But it's all just been positive, it's supportive, and serendipitous in a lot of ways. Just sort of like fascinating connections being made between these stories. And like you said, it all culminates in a giant finale.
But all 11 of you put yourself, and I'm sure thinking of yourself as a child, into the book, but also the characters and the costumes you are. It's sort of that alter ego, whether you're a villain or you're a superhero or whatever you are in this. But putting yourself in it, that maybe it's something about you that you don't see, but this character is going to show something about who I am and who I want to be. Right?
I was surprised at how autobiographical many of these stories ended up being. It wasn't, necessarily what I asked of them, but like you said, you think of your own childhood, what you dealt with then, and they just poured it into these. And some of the stories are just so emotional and powerful, I think, because they're so much based in their own triumphs.
And those memories are so strong from our childhood and those things that we go through. So I want to know if everybody was sort of channeling their 9 to 12-year-old sort of person, so I think it's just so great that you're taking so many different elements, whether it's a piece of cardboard and how it can create something that you wear that changes how you interact with kids in this neighborhood, in this community. And I just loved it.
Thank you.
And I loved the way that some kids were so accepted by each other. So if a boy wants to be a sorceress, he sure can be a sorceress. And a girl can be a villain and somebody who has a lot of anger and that sort of thing. But it was so great to see so many kids of so much diversity that it's fantastic. And I think kids, the comments I've gotten from kids is that they absolutely love that. And they feel like this is more like my school. I see myself in one of these characters. All these great comments that I just thought were brilliant. And to do it in a visual way. And I kept thinking, how did you create the characters? Because if your other 10 collaborators, how did you pass by what you had drawn visually? And how did they feel about how their characters ended up looking?
If they had any kind of like visual references that they wanted me to incorporate, I was happy to do that. And, coming up with these goofy cardboard costumes, part of it was what could a kid actually make for their costume? What would actually be functional? What will serve the purpose of the story? And what can I even draw over and over and over again? There were some cases where I started out with a much more complicated, impressive costume, but then as I drew them over and over again through the rough drafts, certain items would just be dropped off, or I would keep forgetting certain items. And that was a good indication that maybe they weren't very important. They kind of distilled down to their essence.
Right. And I know Katie Schenkel, right, is coming tonight for your event tonight, and she's one of your collaborators. And she created the Big Banshee character.
She's
but
great.
The character's name is Sophie, but this is her alter ego, is the Big Banshee. I thought was a great character.
Thank you.
But
big and loud and
big
boisterous.
and loud. Yes. And she's always told by her parents not to be loud. That she shouldn't, because she's a girl. She shouldn't be loud like that. So this is her way to be that way, which is so fantastic. Also too, I'm just thinking about all the diversity in this, and I don't know if that was intentional or it was just a way to put kids of all kinds in it. I mean, was that something that you did on purpose, or you just wanted to make sure that all kids could see themselves in this book?
We wanted to tell a lot of different stories.
Sure.
We knew that we couldn't tell every story and sort of, do an all-encompassing thing like that.
No,
but
that's impossible.
We really tried to be mindful of representation. And we were really interested in sort of especially playing with ideas of gender expression. And can a girl be loud? Can a girl be strong? Can a girl be a a mad scientist with a goofy mustache, you know?
Yeah, right.
Can a boy dress up like an evil sorceress in a glamorous headpiece and robe, you know?
Right.
So it was definitely a cast, or the roster of creators definitely had a lot of queer voices in it. And they were from all over the country, and you know, it was just really wonderful to be able to bring in their varied life experiences to inform them.
And it was just kids of, you know, we're all so different, you know, and it was showing that, you know, their races, their gender, their, you know, how they see themselves, their identity, but it was their families, how different our families are, but also their interests, you know.
Not everyone needs to be a superhero.
That's right.
There are some kids who just create a cute restaurant or create their own cardboard city because they don't necessarily want to be the main character. They just want to sort of create and watch from the sidelines.
And kids are interested in being sort of that fantastical character. They want to be something that's more scientific or something that's more concrete and that sort of thing. So I thought that was so great about it too.
Thank you.
But I just love the way they all got along, and I love the way that they would go from each other's backyards and everything, because we are missing too much of that today, I think.
Yeah, we didn't want to sugarcoat things. We wanted there to be tension and conflict and turmoil, but then ultimately have things be generally resolved and we wanted to leave the reader feeling good about how things turned out.
And so many not a ton of the pages, but there were pages that there were no bubbles. There were no bubbles, which was great, just to have your visuals and the art in there. I love that too.
There are several stories that are largely wordless, and we honestly felt a little self-conscious about that because for those of us who make a lot of comics and read tons of comics, it's not that weird to switch between wordless and comics and ones with word bubbles. But we were a little bit worried that that people wouldn't know what to make sense of it. I shared an early draft of it with someone, and he said, "Oh, I think you left out the word balloons for the first chapter." And I was like, "No, it's wordless. That's how it is." What would have needed to be said? Like, hopefully, I did a good job of visually telling the story.
No, it was great that it opened with no words.
Thank you.
I love that. So, you know, when I think about comics and how our perception has changed with so many graphic novels available to read and look at, and you know, we had Francois Mouly was here because she's done the Toon books, and she came here twice and talked about the history of comics and why they're so important, and talking about even emerging readers and how comics are better than a lot of the things we think kids will learn to read from. But I'm just wondering, how are comics important to you, and when did your love of comics and comic art, when did that start for you?
It really exploded probably when I was in third grade, and I started reading superhero comics, like the classic X-Men, Spider-Man, all of that stuff. I think it's, you know, I had no trouble reading prose books. I really love reading, but man, there's something about just the colorful costumes and larger than life mythic kind of figures in superhero comics. I'm so drawn to science fiction and fantasy and kind of anything that embellishes upon our everyday life, you know, that adds kind of a fantastical dimension to it. So even though Cardboard Kingdom is entirely set in the real world, it's the kids' imaginations that bring so many other dimensions to life.
And you know, in cardboard, I love cardboard because I remember, I mean, all of us remember as kids making things out of boxes and doing you know, all sorts of things. But you are doing a costume contest, an online one. So tell us a little bit about that, because kids can maybe make their own or just create one from one of the characters in the book.
Well, one of the additionally amazing serendipitous things to have emerged from the project is that the very day that we revealed the cover image for the book, someone who had been following me on social media, who designs paper crafts and costumes, contacted me, and he asked, "Oh, have you ever thought about making designs for the costumes in your book?" And I said, "Well, we've been super excited about the idea of kids actually dressing up in cardboard costumes, but we don't know how to do that." And so he worked with me for months. His name is Costas Natanos. He's in England, and he developed 12 different designs that kids can download for free on his website, print at home, and and assemble.
Yeah.
And they range from super easy ones to very complicated, cool ones. And so they sort of create the basis or a good starting point to make the costumes you see in Cardboard Kingdom. But we encourage kids to make their own from scratch or to use those as a good base. And every month of the summer we'll be picking winners for our online costume contest.
That's so cool.
And the prize will be me drawing them in their costume as a Cardboard Kingdom character.
That's so great. The book was so colorful. And I looked at some of your other art, and you just used just a great source of color.
Well, thanks.
It was so bright, and I think the color means so much in this book. And because I know the kids are going through some difficult things, with parents and things like that, different situations, but the color really made it stand out that this is something that's really cool, that's really happening, and these kids are getting together. But it was also, I think, the diversity of the kids and how they come from such different backgrounds and who they are and what they're going through. There was a lot of things that they were maneuvering through, things that a lot of adults have a real hard time with, but they seem to be doing it in a better way. Yeah.
Well, I think that as long as you're able to sort of talk through your feelings and you're with friends or family where you feel okay being vulnerable, you can get through a lot, and sometimes it will be awkward or you won't know exactly the right thing to do, but hopefully you can just understand each other, come to some sort of peace or starting point.
So this collaboration that you have with your 10, they're, I'm sure, all good friends now. But are you guys going to do more?
We hope so.
Yeah.
It took us 3 years to make this book, so it might take a while to do a book too.
Okay.
So we just hope that readers who like this book will be patient with us.
Yes.
It takes a while.
Yeah. But these characters, I'm sure kids, they definitely want to see more of them. So, yeah. But any more plans for other children's books for you?
Okay. But nothing I can talk about. Yeah.
Well, one thing I do want to say, the little book you put online on your website, The Cloud. You should put that into a picture book.
I do have a little mini comic that I
but
did
it would
print
make
out.
a fantastic picture book for kids.
Thank you.
What would you say is your earliest recollection of drawing something or even writing something that was, you decided, I'm going to be an artist or I'm going to be an author, and that really, maybe your mom and dad still saved it, you still have it. Is there anything that you recall from your childhood?
I drew so many goofy superheroes and stuff. I filled sketchbooks that I still lug around with me whenever I move, and I start to wonder, like, how long can I possibly keep these decades worth of drawings with me? I had some very goofy characters in middle school that still persist to this day. I have a hard time thinking of any one single thing. My parents sent me to art camp throughout much of my childhood in Interlaken, Michigan.
And that's Interlaken's great.
And that really crystallized my ambition and my seriousness about making art.
Wow. When I was thinking and looking at some of the bubbles, and you think of the classic, ow and pow and all those things, and I kept thinking that this bubble kept appearing to me. It's like, Yahoo! I kept saying, when I was reading the book, because there's just something about comic bubbles that so go along with what you're seeing visually. It's so different than when you're thinking of other art, but the words go along so much with what you're seeing on the page. But I just thought that was so great. So I was wondering, what do you hope that kids will take away from reading this book?
Hopefully that it's okay to feel different, and that it can take a while to figure out what makes you different, and that make-believe and costumes and characters sometimes reveal aspects of you that you don't recognize in yourself just yet. I really hope that there's a sense of empathy and compassion and understanding, and like you said, that because it follows so many different characters, I hope that it will give kids an insight into the many different kinds of struggles
right.
that someone can deal with,
sure.
and be a little bit more understanding if someone seems weird or different, that that they have their own life and their own family and their own struggles, and that's okay.
Yeah, it is okay. I was wondering about the transition from the art that you do for the Drag Race and RuPaul stuff, and was it hard to transition from doing art like that to doing children's graphic illustration? Was it something you've always loved to do, or was it a different way to think about how you do your comic art?
Certainly, yeah. It's so fun to work on a kid's book. Right before I worked on Cardboard Kingdom, I was working on a very intense autobiographical book that is sort of on hold for a while.
Oh, okay.
And it was just sort of like gut-wrenchingly difficult to work on. And I worked on it for like a year or two for a while, and I decided, that's come to a stopping point for now. Mm-hmm. It's time to work on something fun. Yeah. It's time to live in a world that's colorful and exciting, and there are knights and robots and monsters and superheroes. Yeah. And it was truly just so wonderful to play with that more kind of elastic, goofy sensibility, and with collaborators where you can sort of just bounce ideas off of each other and make something out of nothing in a way that sometimes when you work by yourself, you can sort of get stuck in doubt and is this good enough? Is this serious enough? Will anyone care?
Yeah. Well, you sure have created something that we care about. It's absolutely brilliant. And I know kids are loving it, and it's going to be on our shelves for a very long time.
Thank you so much.
Great conversation with comic artist Chad Sell and his new book. It's a debut. It's called The Cardboard Kingdom, a great summer read for those 9 to 12-year-olds. Got to read this one. Thanks for joining me on Authors Revealed.